Welcome to Seeking Numina with Elise Wells, the Sacred Places podcast. And today I am joined by three generations of Moon Land. Moon is a planner. I have 2024s right here that I am a massive fan of. I share about it a lot in my work, and I'm fortunate to be selected actually to be in Growing Edge for 2025's Moon edition, which it's downstairs at my personal altar. That's why it's not up here with me. This is last year's. I wrote in to, I think, Masawa first to see if anyone would be interested in coming on the show. And I'm overjoyed beyond words that I have three generations here to share what We Moonland is and how lasting the legacy of sacred places can truly be. Welcome to Seeking Numina. I'm your host, Elise Wells, and I invite you to connect with the sacred wild within and around you through Numina, or sacred sites around the world, and the wisdom they hold. Together, let's remember the old ways, build relationships with land spirits, and dare to reach out to the fairies. The sacred wild is inviting you to dance in the moonlight. Will you answer their call? Because people think you have to go to one, that we can't create them. You know, they're like, oh, I'd love to visit a sacred place someday. I'm like, do you have an altar? That's a start. That's a sacred place. So you guys have taken that to a level much farther than most people even know is possible. And I'm honored to be a part of the legacy a little bit myself by being in Moon 2025, but really just to be here and sharing your message with everybody is this is going in the Hall of Fame for myself of like things I'm proud to have been able to share with the world. So thank you for being here.
Wow, well, sacred places, starting with that, is actually the Weemoon grew out of women's land communities. Actually, what was the first Weemoon was 1981, the first edition. It was just a small little pocket calendar. We didn't at that. It grew out of an international women's land in Denmark, Kvindelandet, which means women's land in Danish, that had started in the late 70s. And it's a place that I had just come to sort of just out of the blue. It was before there was an internet. So you've got to kind of picture how in the world do you contact and be in touch with women from all over the world when you don't even have, email or, it's kind of like talking to young kids about, oh, the day before there was cars or, whatever. But for us, Weemoon has existed, started before we had computers. We just had word processors, and basically it was a handwritten book that was tiny. It was so it could fit in your pocket. And it was especially kind of traveling women who were using it and came to help create it when we actually were forced out of Kvindelandet because it was being surrounded by a mining company. It was kind of a men's community in a way, a corporation anyway, that was a mirror image of us. We were all on the land gardening and building our little houses out of straw bales with tarps over them and things like that, and living through the winter and freezing cold Denmark, and women just gathering from all over. Suddenly, there were these spotlights on us 24 hours a day, night and day, and the sound of the sort of rape of the earth, the drilling going on. And it was just horrendous. And women's traumatic histories and everything were being triggered, and it was just impossible to be there. I mean, and so we ended up leaving. And actually, so the idea of Weemoon, the Weemoon calendar, came to me on the way hitchhiking out of Kvindelandet with my German lover. And we were heading to a farm that her sister's lover had in France, just finding some place to go to. And then a bunch of women followed us afterwards once we came up with this idea of the Weemoon, to help us put it together for the first time. And it was actually translated into 5 languages, English, Spanish, French, German, and Italian. Women from those countries were all part of putting it together, so they all sort of quickly translated it in their own language. And that was the beginning. And the first 5 editions were created over in different countries every year. So really that international aspect was embedded in the beginning to reach out to the women of the world. And it was actually when we were no longer going to be in the same place in that community, how are we going to keep in touch with each other? How are we going to continue to tell the stories and share our cultures and our songs and our relationships and how we're doing life in our communities. And so this Weemoon came as a way to do that, to pass on, this sort of um, the basis of women's culture that brought us all together and that we had so loved being able to learn about each other's cultures that are very different, but also the similarities of the different women's cultures and that kind of thing. So, and the idea, the name Weemoon came to me while hitchhiking. At that point, we're just standing on the road waiting for hours, and so we sort of developed the idea then of creating this moon calendar because the moon, had a direct relationship. This changes, we moon, Gaia rhythms for women, we is what we call it, because the cycles of our lives are influenced directly by the moon, just as the tides of the ocean or women's menstrual cycles are. And so we were just immediately connecting to nature as a source. And of course, we kind of expanded it out into not just nature on Earth, but all the elements, the sun, the moon, the earth, the air, those four elements. And then spirit reality, as I call it, is what comes through the physical, material elements of life on Earth. And that's what's necessary to create life and to sustain life and to transform life and into death. So that's kind of the background.
Wow. Thank you so much for going into all that history. I mean, so 80 was 82 the first year?
81 was the first
81.
year it came out. We worked on it at the end of 1980, and it was with many different women, well, women from those five different countries, at least, who translated into their languages so that, their communities back home could be part of this, could begin to contribute. And, we're really envisioning how do we reach the women of the world, and when we don't all live together. And
The
so it
divine
was like through
timing.
our culture, through our shared culture, and through community with women all over the world,
Yeah. It
developed that.
is amazing to think of creating what you created in a time where snail mail was it. Like that was your chance of connection. And how do
Mm.
you, like, I've always am amazed. Like my great grandparents were World War II pen pals. Like she was at home and her friends sewed her address and name into a sock that was for the boys overseas. And that's how they connected. And I've always been like, that, how did those letters not get misdirected? Or like it was fate to me that they connected.
Uh-huh.
And it's the same in this instance to imagine
Right.
like you had to have the divine on your side to create We Moon Land, to create We Moon rhythms. And it also like to have it translated and to have that foresight of like international inclusivity. That's something we fight for even today to have
Uh-huh.
that. And yeah,
Right. And maybe
44 years.
maybe you and Ashley can talk a little bit about how, I mean, we've carried it on basically, and it's been on at Women's Land, Weemoon Land here in Oregon, which is actually the first women's land in this country that I originally started in 1973 with my sister and another friend. And then after a few years of sort of the very rough beginnings, because nobody knew about community and, all the different races and, places we come from and what we do and conflict comes up and we had very little experience about how to deal with interpersonal conflict. And it was like, whoa, we really have to begin from the beginning. And so I took off for 10 years of wandering basically and ended up going to Hawaii and then Europe where my ancestry comes from, and that's kind of what started it.
Wow. So it, for you, it was the seeking of Numina, the seeking of sacred places that allowed you to come home and create a
Right,
sacred place.
right. And then to extend that to our home is our culture and our community and our creativity, and to be able to share that with each other and expand it again outward. So, when we can't be physically in the same place, and we're not, we come from all over the world, and we wanted to reach women from all over the world. And now we're starting to do that in a new kind of way with maybe you can talk about that, one of you two, about the circle, the selection circles and things like that that's expanding our outreach and our input into it.
Yeah, this is the 2025 version, the year that we're in now. And Elise, it's so lovely to see you in its pages. And I loved what you said in the beginning of this interview about how we are seeking and creating sacred spaces, and that's what we endeavor to do here with this book. That
Hmm.
we bring together. I think there's somewhere around 2,000 to 4,000 submissions of art and writing from women all over the world, and approximately 400 or 500 that make it into the book each year. And we do this incredible weaving together of art and writing from women around the world every single year. It's an anthology and an astrological date book and a sacred space, and it's really lovely to be a part of. I'm so grateful for Musawa's founding and those women way back, and that we can carry it on into the future.
I think it's so wonderful that there's a way now to connect, and also this generation that's more used to out of the body experience, but technological connection. Which I mean, back in the day, we didn't even have a typewriter. We were really, it was very basic, and it was handwritten and stuff. But now, we have a way. It started at when COVID happened, right? That's when the online selection circles began. And so, given that, then you grew from that to having a worldwide group of women who are helping create it as well.
Which is very exciting. Before that, all of our selection circles were in person and mostly in Oregon, some a little on the West Coast in Washington and California. But now we get to have people come in from wherever they are, which is really wonderful.
And we are starting to have women on staff who are living in other places, like Ashley, for instance.
Yes, I love hearing about the connection to sacred space and then also creating community. And really I love how thank you, Sue, for mentioning like the pandemic and Masawa also mentioning that the pandemic helped to create even a wider, outreach because, without, going online, I wouldn't even be here probably a part of women's staff, but it's also huge to know that I'm a part of WeMoon because of online searching. I was a college student and I was already, a witchy goddess minded woman, going to college. I was living in UC Santa Cruz campus. And so I had the woods and the meadow as my backyard. And so I was connecting to nature in a very real way, but I wanted like a witchy goddess planner. And I went online to Google and I'm like, okay, witchy goddess planner, what's out there? And then Weemoon's in the top three searches. And I'm like, okay, I'm gonna get a Weemoon. And then I realized, oh wow, this is exactly what I've been searching for, especially, we have goddesses and spirituality that are, very inclusive. There were goddesses of color, and I've never seen something like that mass produced. And, a year later after graduating, I see online women's hiring, and I just graduated. And what am I going to do as a new graduate? And I graduated with a BA in feminist studies. And I'm like, I'll just submit my resume and let's see what happens. And then I get a phone call from Sue and Barb, and then the rest is history. I'm here, and I live in California, so I think Women's first remote employee, I believe, and so, there's this element of carrying the tradition from Oregon here, in my office here in California, and feeling included to just continue this beautiful and precious work of creating sacred space, connection to land, because, we are controlled, and the moon does rule us. We are absolutely in line with the moon cycles, and I use that in my everyday life on a personal level, but on a spiritual level, it's just really really incredibly important, and I'm excited to be a part of this journey as the newer generation of Wee Moon.
We're excited to have you on staff.
And it
Thank you.
is really beautiful because so often people, especially today, I think like attention spans are much lower than ever in history. And so people just give up on things pretty easily, like they'll like really beautiful things. Like I've had friends who have dropped podcasts or dropped book projects or because it took too long. And the best advice I ever got was keep going. It's simple advice, but it's true. And I would like to ask, were there any big challenges that you were like, this is it, Moon's done, but you came through them?
Well, the one big one for me was when someone came to live on the land and then just wanted to sort of find a way to profit from it and tried to sue us for, you can't even remember what, but it was completely ridiculous. But we still had to go through the lawsuit of it and the whole thing. And at that point, I was like, oh my God, I didn't start this for a business. I'm not a business-oriented person, even though I'm Capricorn and I should be, but I'm not. I just don't want to do the business part anymore. And so I went to, actually, it was the 80th birthday of Jean Mountain Grove, one of the sort of originators of women's lands, an elder of women's lands in Oregon. And she was in Southern Oregon. It was her 80th birthday. Now here I am, 81. I can totally relate. But anyway, and so we just put the word out to women in Southern Oregon, and then Barb and her partner at the time said, well, yes, we'd like that for a job. And Barb had some, I guess she graduated with a business degree of some sort, undergraduate degree, I think. And so she knew she was familiar with how to deal with the business aspect of it, and she was into it and passionate about it and passionate about Weemoon. And she had traveled around a little bit and visited and was really interested. So it was perfect. Then passing it on to Sue and to Barb and Sue very soon after that, and they've done a wonderful job of just, there's no way that I could have kept up with all that's involved in doing business these days, and certainly the whole online component, which I can barely muster at this point to even get online. Um, so that,
Barb's been the manager of the company, and I with her, Barb for about 20 years and me for about 18 years. And we call ourselves the We Moonagers, not managers. Um, but there haven't really been any cataclysmic things that have happened where we're like, oh no, We Moon isn't going to make it. What has happened more often is, oh my gosh, this something is happening in the world and people are coming to WeMoon. People are reaching for this analog, slow paper thing that we put our heart and souls in. And we're like, okay, we have to make sure we print it enough this year.
That authenticity is exactly why I think it's a legacy of, I mean, it is going to be a continued legacy of generations because I agree. I think that's the world we're in now is AI is something so unprecedented. Like I mean, like I remember reading about AI in 2009. I remember because I remember listening to this like it was an audiobook and it was about like where AI is at. And at that time, it was like a chess AI. And he was like, and this is where it could go. And it just never was part of the conversation that it would usurp creativity like this. I don't know how long the powers that be were planning it, but I think it's taken the majority of like the normal peons like ourselves to recognize like this is very sinister. This is very scary. And I agree. I think I've been mentioning We Moon for probably 4 years now since I started the Magic Kitchen podcast. But this these last few years, I actually get a lot of messages from people. They're like, "Hey, I'm looking for something that's paper that I know isn't made by AI." And honestly, it's getting hard to say this is definitely not made by AI, like sometimes about certain things. But with We Moon, it is so easy to know that that ain't gonna be the case. It is so confident. Like I'm like, this is for sure. This is the thing I can recommend. And what you said about like curating it as sacred space too, like I found one of my favorite pages from 2024 just to show the viewers. But like this art is not by the person who wrote the poem. And yet it's like made for each other. And I think that's why We Moon is probably no, it is why We Moon is going to survive the ages, is because you're coming from a space of co-creation. Your hearts
Mhm.
are in it for co-creation, not personal gain. And everybody submitting is coming in with that understanding as well, to
Mhm.
be part of a legacy. And I know that anyone who isn't submitting from that place wouldn't even be chosen because they wouldn't have the energy. Nothing they submit would have that energy, and so it wouldn't fit.
Yeah, that's incredible.
It's one of
Oh,
my favorite things about being at that table. We call it creatrix. Now, the art and writing has gone through the weaving circles, some online and some in person, and we're left with these piles of what we call the cream of the creamiest, the best, the most well loved, the most well connected to art and writing. And we just start pairing them together and putting art and writing or art and art or writing and writing, and they sort of swim gently upstream into their own little tributaries. This becomes the Beltane moon, and this becomes the winter solstice, and they just find each other, and it is a really fruitful and beautiful process to be a part of. I feel so lucky that that's my job.
yeah, co-creating
Mhm.
is what we do. I like
Yeah.
that term.
Mhm.
And it's really a lot about what women's culture is about. It's not about profit, give as little as you possibly have to get as most profit as you possibly can get. That's what defines profit in the patriarchal capitalist system that sort of
Right.
rules, and the younger generations are a little bit caught up in all of that. But co-creating is we're I think, it's a question of how low we have to get before we can start coming up again. But we're at that turning point. We're in that very difficult and trying time of not the old way, not sustaining, and the new way, you know, destroying it, sort of blowing it all apart, and what's going to come out of that. And I think the women's culture, women as the creators of life out of our own bodies, that is an incredible power and a special thing. And it has, dominated women's lives often for centuries, for eons. But the work of that is, taking care of people. It's first place giving birth and then raising children up, and then being there to support the people of the world, all beings. It's not, and so it sort of comes naturally in a way. It's women's culture, but women's culture has a history, that goes way, way back, that is very unique, in that the emphasis is not just on me, myself, and I, and it's on we and us, and how, and gathering together, and what is helpful as opposed to what is destructive, and how do we grow a healthy community, and children who have choices and make good choices, and it takes a lot of care and a lot of energy, and women are the ones who do that part of human life. And so we have a lot to give, but since patriarchy, the patriarchy, which is basically dominance and control, male dominance and control, and then it gets, spread out to, control of anyone and who's different, I sometimes call it the terrible twos. The patriarchy is sort of like the terrible twos, where a child is born, is just totally one with the mother, coming out of her body, all one on every level, and then suddenly discovers that actually the mother is separate from them and maybe has other things she has to do too, or whatever, and that you're not the center of the whole world. That's the terrible twos, where then, oh my God, kids, sort of react with anger and destructiveness and being against things for the first time. And we have to get through that stage. It's a valid stage. It's understanding that, yes, I'm different from you, and that's okay. We get to be different, and to start honoring our differences, and not eliminating them, not saying we're all the same so that way we can be equal. No, we get to be different, and we get to be who we are. And that we support that among, you know, all, all our all our relations.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love that analogy of the terrible twos. That's so true. Because we move at such a cosmic pace as a you know, species as a human race. But at the same time, because I'm thinking of that as like we entered the age of Aquarius in the past couple of years here. So I feel like maybe that's the death throes we're seeing. Like that's kind of been my energy around as we're recording this. It's March 18th, so it's around Venus is retrograde right now, Mercury is retrograde. You know, this comes out in May, so I think the Venus retrograde will be over by then, and Mercury will be out of retrograde at that point. But yeah, there's turmoil in the world that I'm sad to say will probably still be going on when this releases. It makes sense. I mean, it's a comfort in a way to know that these are the death throes. I mean, the extremism we're seeing of the oppression that's escalating in the West, it's the death throes. That means at the end of this, we need to be ready to rebuild. And like you said, that's women's work. We
Mhm.
thrive in spaces of where we are needed in multiple capacities, where it's about attention and organization and patience all at once. And I think that's why the goddess is rising the way that she is, and in the diverse ways. I loved how you said that, Musawa, that we aren't here to be the same.
Mhm.
Equality is kind of, it's a lovely idea, but it's kind of a myth. It's equity that we're reaching for.
Mhm. Mhm.
And lifting each other up through that is, yeah, it is women's work. It's the sacred divine feminine that is here for all of us. And is it within all of us, ready to be ignited.
Right. And when you think about that, we're sort of, it feels like right now, maybe we're reverting to an infantile stage of development in terms of human relations, then that's when women need to step in. That's when the mothers take over. That's when the grandmothers take over. That's when the matriarchs, we all, at whatever stage of life we're at right now, that's when we all need to come together and raise humanity up to, the next stage. And yes, if you talk about numerology, are there one, two, three? I mean, so okay, we're at two. We need to get to three where there's some sort of synthesis, some sort of coming together and a recognition of the different differences and learn how to get beyond that and go to the next stage of, starting over with something. And that's I think where we're at.
So to close our conversation here, is there any advice you would give for people who are at the helm, perhaps, of something monumental? You know, somebody who is a community creator. What advice do you have for them?
One thing I would say is the same that we're talking about needing to be there for others. It's like women know how to be there for others, but we don't necessarily are not necessarily encouraged to be there for ourselves. And actually, what it takes to make this change is horrendous, and it's requiring so much of us. And so we can't really keep up with it all. And so I almost say we do have to still start with ourselves. And for women, that's really important. And take care of yourself, do what you can and you can't do what you can't do. And it's not just up to us, but we do have something special to contribute at this point. And what is that? Getting in touch with that with yourself. Where's your passion? What is it you really want to do? We have this life for who knows how much longer, What do you want to do with it? Actually, also about starting from within. And the moon kind of encourages that in terms of intuition, you know, in a nighttime. It's a nighttime comes, that's when we see it at night, when it's darker, it's harder to see around you. And I think that's a sort of clue or something. That's a hint that I get from the moon that we need to sort of start over at this point from really honoring what's going on inside of us and what we're feeling and what we're thinking and what we're seeing and what we're doing. And the spirit reality, acknowledging and recognizing that spirit reality is real. We're in a very materialistic world where we think it's all about, physical form or physical whatever resources. And it's, no, spirit reality is made up of all the different, as I like to say in the We Moon Tarot, that the four physical elements, the earth, I always have to count them off on my fingers, but the earth, the water, the fire, the air, those four elements, then spirit is the formless one, the formless element. And so it comes through the material elements and not in opposition to. Spirituality is not in opposition to material reality. In the wide view of the world, they're one in they work together. And yet somehow then the spirit comes through the material form, then suddenly material takes over, and what you see and what you have and what you own and whatever. That's, so it's the importance of spirituality is really key to seeing our direct experience, our direct connection with spirit in all that we do. And remember that and let it, keep checking in with that and making sure that you're honoring that in yourselves and each other.
I would only add to what you're saying, Masao, which I think is so beautiful, and that is that I'm not saying anything new. I'm only quoting already really famous people, but the reason that the choir is so beautiful is because in unison, in working together, in the mutual aid of caring about everyone else's needs as well as our own, we can drop out and the song will keep carrying on while we take care of ourselves. And then we come back in and someone else can come out. And so that way the song keeps going while individually we're taking care of ourselves and each other. And to quote you, Elise, we just keep going. We keep going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we keep going. And WeMoon has kept going for 45 years now. We've just produced the 45th edition.
And embrace hope. There is hope, there are people standing ready to take on the next level, the torch, and to continue to press on. And I would just also say just finding groundedness in self and finding community through connection and holding on to that and holding on to the very hope that binds us all together.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. And where can people learn all about We Moon Land, and of course get the planner?
So everything is on our website, which is wemoon.ws, like website. You could also go to wemoon.com. It will direct you there. And yeah, there's a page about our history and We Moon Land, and you can purchase the planner and all of our other products. We have a beautiful tarot deck, a children's book, an anthology, a lot of great, beautiful products.
Yeah, yes, you do. And we'll put that link all up in the show notes too.
Great.
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here, for sharing all the wisdom you shared today, and for creating this legacy for so many women, thousands and thousands, probably close to the hundreds of thousands of women benefit every year from what you all create. And that's a legacy it's hard to put into words. But we did our best today.
Thank you. Thank you. We really appreciate what you do in supporting the spirit of women.
Always. Thank you for seeking Numina with me today. Join me at patreon.com/Elise Wells to support this show and get access to a library of rituals, exclusive videos, meditations, and more. To learn more about my upcoming retreats, book a tarot reading, or learn with me in workshops, classes, or mentorship, visit seekingnumina.com.